And there you have it. 15 firearms that turned good money into bad memories. Some of them were promising ideas that were ruined by poor execution, while others were flawed from the very beginning. Let me know in the comments below about the most disappointing firearm you've ever owned. And if you appreciate these no-nonsense breakdowns, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Stay safe and spend your money wisely. Number 10. The Remington R51. Few firearms have cratered in value quite as spectacularly as the Remington R51. When it was first released, it commanded a price of around $500. Today, you'd be lucky to get $200 for one in pristine condition. That's a $300 bonfire. So where did it all go wrong? The R51 was plagued with problems from day one. We're talking catastrophic failures to feed and mangled brass casings that looked like they'd been chewed on. The trigger was a mushy, unpredictable mess. Pulling it felt less like firing a precision instrument and more like breaking a cheap plastic toy. Even after a full-scale factory recall and a supposed relaunch, the gun's toxic reputation was permanent. The Pedersen-style locking block was marketed as a revolutionary feature to reduce recoil, but it doesn't matter how clever an engine is if the transmission is made of glass. The gun simply would not cycle reliably. These days, the R51 is little more than a paperweight with a serial number. Try to trade one in at your local gun shop, and you'll be met with a polite laugh. Losing 60% of a gun's value isn't just depreciation, it's a market verdict. Number 9. The Remington RP9. This was Remington's ill-fated attempt to compete in the crowded polymer striker-fired pistol market. At launch, it sold for about $400. Now you can find them languishing in used gun cases for $150, if they haven't been thrown in the bargain bin already. That's a $250 lesson in how not to build a pistol. The trigger felt like dragging a cinder block through a sandbox. The magwell looked like it was crudely carved out with a rusty Dremel tool. And the slide often had trouble going fully into battery, a fatal flaw for any defensive firearm. The tactile reset was practically non-existent. It was more of a vague hope than a mechanical feature. Gun shops quickly grew tired of these being traded in and simply started refusing them. When a dealer won't even offer you store credit for a firearm, you know you're holding a certified dud. The frame felt flimsy and cheap. The finish wore off if you looked at it too hard, and the sights seemed like an afterthought. When the high point is considered a more refined option by comparison, you have a serious problem. Number 8. The Inter-Ordnance FX-9. An AR-style pistol-caliber carbine that takes Glock mags? On paper, that sounds like a home run. These sold new for around $700. On the used market, you're looking at $400 on a good day. That's a $300 hit for a carbine that became infamous for cracking bolt carriers under normal use. The promise of Glock magazine compatibility was a huge selling point, until owners discovered that the magwell was incredibly picky about which magazines it would accept. The trigger felt like it belonged on a $50 airsoft replica, and the entire platform was needlessly complicated for what should have been a simple blowback action. Quality control was a complete lottery. A few owners managed to get them running reliably with expensive aftermarket parts, but most just cut their losses and moved on. Pawn shops might still take them, but don't expect a good offer. The FX9 is a perfect example of a brilliant concept completely ruined by poor execution. Number 7. The Kel-Tec Sub-2000 Generation 1. A folding pistol-caliber carbine is a fantastic idea for a compact truck gun or a backpack gun. The first-generation Kel-Tec Sub-2000 generated a ton of excitement when it launched for around $400. These days, you'd be lucky to get $200 for one. That's a 50% loss before you've even zeroed the sights. The Gen 1 had a trigger that felt like pulling a rusty nail out of a board. The front sight had a tendency to wander off zero, and the cheek weld was so uncomfortable it felt like a form of punishment. Sure, it folded up into a neat little package, but nobody actually enjoyed shooting the thing. The charging handle was flimsy and awkward, and the bolt would frequently get stuck. Once the much-improved Gen 2 model was released, the value of the original plummeted overnight. The first Gen Sub-2000 is a masterclass in how bad ergonomics can completely tank a firearm's long-term value. Number 6. The Beretta Nano. With a futuristic name like Nano, you'd expect a cutting-edge micro-compact. When it debuted, it carried a price tag of around $450. Today, you can expect to get about $200 for one. That's another $250 haircut. The trigger was notoriously long and heavy, and the slide required a Herculean effort to rack. For a pistol marketed for deep concealment, it was incredibly difficult for many people to operate. It was also extremely picky with ammunition, especially hollow points. The frustrating part is that the ergonomics of the grip were actually quite good, but a comfortable grip is useless if the gun itself is a jam-o-matic. Once Beretta released the APX carry as its replacement, the Nano's value went into a complete nosedive. Now, it's mostly a cautionary tale collecting dust in the back of used gun display cases. Number 5. The Bushmaster XM-15, post-ban production. During the panic-buying frenzies of the past, these AR-15s were everywhere. You'd pay around $900 for one brand new. In today's much more competitive market, you'd be lucky to sell one for $600. That's a solid $300 loss right out of the gate. The quality control on these rifles was notoriously inconsistent. Canted front sight blocks, gritty triggers, and improperly staked castle nuts were common complaints. Many of these rifles were also severely overgassed, leading to violent cycling and premature parts wear. The finish was often chalky and cheap-looking, and the charging handle felt like it was grinding on sand. Even after sinking money into upgrades, most owners could never recoup their initial investment. In a market that is now saturated with high-quality, affordable AR-15s, the post-ban Bushmaster XM-15 has lost all of its appeal. Number 4. The Inter-Ordnance Incorporated AK-47. Somehow, Inter-Ordnance, or IO, managed to build an AK platform that was less reliable than its cheapest foreign-made counterparts. New, these rifles sold for about $800. Now, you might get $400, but only from a buyer who doesn't know any better. That's a $400 tuition payment to the School of Hard Knocks. The manufacturing tolerances on these rifles were horrifying. We're talking about warped receivers, cracked bolts, and dangerously inconsistent headspace. One rifle might run okay, while the next one would be a jam machine. The furniture was cheap and poorly fitted, and the trigger group felt awful. These rifles did serious damage to the AK's legendary reputation for reliability. Experienced shooters and collectors avoid these rifles like the plague, and for very good reason. Number 3. The SIG Sauer Mosquito. This .22 long rifle pistol was supposed to be a high-quality trainer that mirrored the ergonomics of SIG's larger centerfire pistols. It launched at around $400. Today, it's worth maybe $150 on a good day. That's a $250 loss for a pistol that was famous for malfunctioning. The Mosquito was absurdly ammunition sensitive. Only the highest velocity .22 long rifle rounds stood a chance of cycling the action. With standard velocity ammo, it was a jam factory. The trigger was vague and mushy, the decocker felt flimsy, and the overall reliability was a joke. The polymer frame felt cheap, and the fit and finish were not up to SIG's usual standards. SIG eventually and quietly discontinued the Mosquito, but the damage to its reputation was done. These pistols now serve as an example of what not to buy in the rimfire market. Number 2. The Taurus Spectrum. You have to give Taurus credit for trying something new and colorful with the Spectrum. It launched at about $300, but on today's used market, it sits at around $150. It cut your investment in half for a shooting experience you'd probably rather forget. The trigger felt like squeezing a wet sponge. The slide had a tendency to not return fully into battery. And worst of all, the magazines would sometimes fail to lock into place, making reloads a complete gamble. Sure, the grip was comfortable and the color options were unique, but none of that matters if the gun is not reliable. The sights were tiny and the build quality felt rushed. At the end of the day, the Spectrum is a pistol that is better known for its ambitious design than its actual performance. Most informed buyers steer clear. Number 1. The Century Arms C308. On paper, a budget-friendly American-made version of the classic H&K battle rifle sounds like a fantastic idea. These rifles sold new for around $700. Today, their resale value is closer to $300. That's a $400 hit for a rifle that was plagued with issues. The bolt gap, a critical measurement for this type of roller-delayed blowback system, was notoriously inconsistent. Extraction was unreliable, and the trigger felt like it was salvaged from a piece of farm equipment. The finish was rough, and the sights were often misaligned from the factory. For shooters who were expecting H and K-like performance, it was a massive disappointment. Some dedicated owners have managed to get their C308s running well after a lot of work and aftermarket parts, but the resale value was dead on arrival. And there you have it, 15 firearms that turned good money into bad memories. Some of them were promising ideas that were ruined by poor execution, while others were flawed from the very beginning. Let me know in the comments below about the most disappointing firearm you've ever owned. And if you appreciate these no-nonsense breakdowns, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Stay safe and spend your money wisely.